While of course I will do my best to skirt around plot points, this review likely contains enough information to spoil something. If you want to play Soma completely fresh, suffice it to say that Soma is a competent horror game that gets better the longer you play it, even if it lacks the intensity of Amnesia and smells a little stale. Now stop watching. Soma is a slow burner, and for a horror game that's commendable. Amnesia, and really all the horror games that followed in its wake, went the same way. White-knuckle opening hours that descend into indifference once you've been killed by the monster and learn its routine. For that reason, Amnesia fans might feel disappointed by Soma's opening hours, maybe even bored. I've been asked not to show the first couple of settings to avoid major spoilers, but in summary, they are light, safe spaces in which to get to grips with Frictional's expanded physics system. The way you interact with the world is similar to what we know, pushing, pulling, switching, and throwing with your mouse, but Soma gives you the chance to practice all of this before putting you in any danger. But even once the dank hallway stalking hundreds of meters below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean begins, you're not going to be wetting yourself. I was halfway through before I encountered an enemy that made me consistently freeze up with fright, bellowing and shrieking in the dark. Rather, these first few hours are for the story and the characters, which take much greater prominence than in Amnesia. They're a means to introduce Simon, the protagonist who's just woken up on an undersea base without a clue what's happening. They also allow time to establish repartee with his companion, Catherine, and they open up Soma's central themes of mind, body, and humanity. It's like a slightly less preachy Machine for Pigs. It does drag on. After initial wonder at the prettiness of it, the early underwater walks become tedious, particularly when you realise you're faster than the threats out there and simply nip past them. Having the player fixed to the seabed seems like a weird, missed opportunity when 3D movement is so much better for startling and disorienting. But in exchange for this dry, resolutely linear start, Soma is able to ramp up the tension in the second half. The sea that was once a pleasant blue becomes black as you journey deeper and deeper into the abyss, and allusion to the godless tentacled critters lurking outside the light recalls the horror of Amnesia's water level. Soma has a very different structure to Amnesia. And though it really risks losing people in the first half, with no instant scares, it's much weaker PewDiePie bait, I do think it was right to shake things up and to try to solve the problem of diminishing scares. It has a decent crack at it. That's about the only thing it freshens up, however. The enemies inside Pathos 2's rusting halls are old news, variously drawn to light and sound and chasing you until you find cover or get far enough away that eating you doesn't seem worth the bother. We are living in a world post-alien isolation. These chases are insipid now that we've faced AI that adapts and schemes. Anyone who's completed a Frictional game will know how to trick Soma's zombies. There's also no need to manage resources. Light isn't an issue, your batteries last the length of the game, and sanity, though it's inadvisable to stare at enemies for too long, isn't a resource per se. You can hide in the dark as long as you want without losing your marbles. Health there is. Take a beating and you'll wake up at the point you fell, groggy as anything and with an obnoxious chromatic aberration effect that you'll trip over yourself to turn off. Get mauled again, and you're dead. Well, shunted back to the nearest checkpoint. Juggling resources was part of what made Amnesia terrifying. It forced you to explore scary corners to keep your light fueled, and to move when you might not want to stay sane. In the absence of resource management, the linearity of Soma becomes clear. There are no choices that affect the outcome. There are lots of fetch tasks before you can proceed, and every form of transportation you take will crash and force you to take the long way round. Instead, Soma leans on its story again, its exploration of what makes a human human. The trouble is, this tale has been told so many times before in books, film, TV, and yes, video games. It's entirely predictable. I guess the plot twist from the trailer, and even Simon, the guy dropped in this horrific situation, comes off board. One second he's slightly spooked at his predicament, the next he accepts a life-changing revelation that would drive most to insanity with the sort of indifference I'd employ to order a Big Mac. Don't get me wrong, the acting is superb. There is real rapport between the two central characters. But in order to move things along, the script places emphasis in very peculiar places. I can't help but feeling that swapping out a gathering task for some more logical character development would have been a good call. Soma is an experiment for Frictional. It puts good distance between it and Amnesia without completely alienating fans, and it succeeds in being a horror game that builds as opposed to petering out. That's new, and that's excellent. Play it to the end because it deserves it. The cost is that it's slower, and many of the mechanics that make games scary have been sidelined in favour of a story that's just slightly off. Soma is decent, but I'm more excited to see what Frictional do next with this experience.